Hey everybody, I'm Sunil Kalgi from Outclip, and today we're going to be speaking with Lak Thiagarajan, who is a wireless industry expert. He's a sales and technical professional, and he's the director at Solid, where he runs a remote team. So, Lak, thank you for doing this interview with us. Could
Absolutely.
you give us a quick intro to your company as well as what you do at Solid?
Sure, absolutely. As Sunil just mentioned, I work for a company called Solid. We're based in Seoul, South Korea, and our North American headquarters is in Dallas, Texas. We are a wireless telecommunications manufacturer, OEM. We actually make wireless hardware equipment that help enhance cellular wireless signals for operators and for public safety services within buildings. Especially in the era of high-speed connectivity and data needs, which is becoming more of a requirement rather than a luxury. More and more buildings like airports, convention centers, stadiums, enterprise buildings, commercial real estate buildings, all of these require better connectivity, and that's exactly what we do here at Solid. We actually make the equipment, we help design the systems, and then we work closely with the different operators, both here in the US and elsewhere around the globe, to ensure that these systems are functional and actually help serve and solve people's problems. What I do specifically at Solid is I got a dual role. I run two different teams. One is the technical training team, and the other is the RF engineering design team. My team is on the training side, very specifically is involved with helping educate the customer base, that is both end users who actually use our equipment, and also third-party vendors who actually help engineer these systems as our representative, if you will. So we need to educate them on what the equipment does, what it can do, how they can actually operate this, make it work, make it happen, and so on. So that's a very, very high intensity technical aspect of the training group. And on the design side, which typically is the first step to any of these systems being put in, is we actually design these systems from an engineering perspective to make sure that all the frequencies from all the different operators and the public safety needs, or any other frequencies that buildings may need, are actually designed efficiently. They're predicted, so we can actually run some predictive algorithms and modeling to make sure that these systems are intended to work the way they do, because obviously a lot of these systems are pretty complex and expensive. So that's basically what the design team does, and I'm responsible for both of them for the Americas, North and South.
Okay, and I understand you run a remote team. Can you tell me kind of where your team is located? Like, how distributed are you? And if you're in different cities, continents, you can give us some perspective on that.
Yeah, and that's actually very been my sort of background for the last almost decade in this industry. I've been with Solid for a little over 5 years, but most of my time in the industry has been spent remotely personally as well. And ever since I've taken over these two teams, all my teams are distributed around the country. So on the training side, I have a guy out in the East Coast, on the East Coast time zone. I have a guy on the Central time zone. And on the design side, I have folks basically spread across East Coast to West Coast, across all time zones. So we certainly work remotely all the time, and it's one of those things that's second nature to me. I don't even really think about the fact that they're not physically in a cube next to me or in an office next to me. So that's kind of how we've been doing things for a long time. So across the country, and aside from obviously all the work that we support across the 4 time zones within North America, we also do support a lot of work for overseas regions as well, especially specifically on the design side. So obviously, time zones become that much more of a factor when we have to collaborate and turn around deliverables to customers or our own colleagues in overseas markets.
Got it. And when you say you're supporting customers, could you tell us like what kind of support do you give them? Is it taking phone calls, or are you in person at the field site helping your customers? What kind of support does it entail?
A little bit of both, but I would say it's primarily at this point weighted heavily in the favor of customer support, not so much being in the field. A lot of it can be resolved remotely, whether it's phone calls or whether it's remote desktop type connections, whether it's emailing obviously back and forth, because I mean the nature of the field I'm in, Sunil, ironically, is a lot of times when we're interfacing with customers in the field, they don't actually have connectivity to connect with me to talk about their problems. The whole point there is to fix something that's either gone wrong or deploying it first up. So even if I wanted to, there's no way we have connectivity to actually connect. So a lot of times we are actually relying on sort of, maybe whether it's emails or perhaps a document that we send out to them that they have to review on their own. Real-time collaboration becomes a much more challenge simply because that's what we're there to do in the first place.
Got it. Okay. And you mentioned like some aspect of your customer support involves like sharing, kind of doing screen sharing or video, remote video and stuff. Could you get into some details on that? Like what tools do you use, and where has it been like effective, as well as some of the challenges you've seen with doing remote troubleshooting for your customers?
Yeah. I think you probably understand this well, given that this is kind of the space you're in. But for a long time in the industry, I mean, I was when I started in the industry myself, I was on the other side of the fence, where I was the person on site trying to call support or trying to call my colleague or whoever else I needed to actually need some reference from or help from. So at the time, we were mostly using remote desktop screen share. We obviously use GoToMeeting. We use Skype sharing, but it's not one tool specifically, which I think is a telling in the fact that it's not there's one tool that solved every problem we have. It's just whatever works at the time. It's whatever is seamless. It's obviously that's what we're looking for because time is of the essence, and more importantly, I don't want to be tinkering around with technology when I'm trying to basically get the work done, right? And that really hasn't changed much over the years. Now that I sit on the other side of the fence, where I collaborate with folks on the field or on my own design teams that I'm trying to sometimes work with, we just gone through a plethora of different tools. Most of it's real-time collaboration. So it really is one of those things that we understand the idiosyncrasies of certain tools and what they can and cannot do. And we just make do. And nothing's been, I would say, a showstopper. We obviously, if a couple of tools give us too many road bumps, we simply move on to a different tool. But I would say the tools I mentioned previously, those are generally the tools we typically use.
Okay. And you kind of alluded earlier to the fact that you also you have a team that does customer training, right? So could you shed some light on what kind of training you do for customers? And let's start with that.
Sure. On the training side, we actually have a two-pronged approach. One, obviously, there is this in-house video-based, self-paced, take any time you want type training. So these are pre-recorded videos, primarily educating folks, customers, both internal and external, about what our products, about the physicalities of it, what connections are, what components are. But it's really a one-way traffic. There's no interactive mode or anything. It's just video. It's mobile optimized and web optimized, so they can just take it at any time as long as they're connected to the network. And then we obviously have our in-person training, which is a little bit more, given the nature of the industry we're in, there's a big hands-on component to this. So no matter how much I can show it in virtual space, the real world, the touch and feel and being able to touch equipment and turn them up is going to be a very, very key component to it, because ultimately that's what the systems are going to be designed and installed as. So the folks come in for a in-person live class. Typically runs over a couple days or more, and they get to really experience everything in the real world. Ironically, the video-based courses, a video-based training is it is a prerequisite to attend these hands-on classes, because we want people to have some element of knowledge around what they have seen in the videos previously and understand that, and then of course attend these classes.
Okay.
And we do these in-person classes pretty frequently all around the country every year.
Got it. So you mentioned, like, since you're you're in the business of kind of physical kind of boxes that customers have to use, you'd rather give them in-person training. So how do you try to kind of make up for for that in like doing remote training, where you don't have the luxury of walking your customer through all the functions of your product? So what do you focus on in your remote training, and and what format of training is it? Videos, quizzes, that sort of thing, as well as um, how has the adoption been from a customer standpoint? Like, how do they like your the training that you provide?
And you're absolutely right. As much as I would like to have every customer who works with our equipment to attend an in-person class, it doesn't happen for a variety of reasons, right? Timelines, costs, bandwidth, so many different reasons. Obviously, that is still the sort of holy grail of being certified on our equipment. But we have a lot of sessions that we do. Sometimes it's an online webinar series where, once a month or once a quarter, or depending on the customer's need, we would set some things up. A lot of these are PowerPoint based. Obviously, you're just presenting something, you're sharing screens. We typically we use Skype for Business. We use GoToMeeting. Normally, I would say the two main tools that we have typically gravitated towards. We used to use a couple other tools in the past and work out, so we have eliminated them. But those are pretty common. In fact, I would say those are much more frequent than the in-person classes. The in-person classes are much more scheduled, so planned. A lot of the remote trainings or conferences, so whatever, we typically work with customers. Probably are, first of all, very focused on a specific topic, perhaps, or a specific need. But also, it's scheduled maybe a few days or a few weeks out, and there's no set frequency. They happen as needed, and obviously we work with a lot of different customers, so it's very frequent and just interactive. There's not a lot of quizzes or that sort of thing. It's more Q&A type, where we're trying to mostly educate the customers about it. But we certainly actually, since you bring it up, in our in-person classes, we actually do use some real-time polling Q&A quizzes. We actually use a company called Turning Technologies, and users have the ability to, with their devices, whether it's a laptop or a mobile device, actually respond to questions that are being asked in real time, and we can actually see the performance in real time as well.
Got it. So you mentioned having videos as part of your customer training. How does your team go about creating content for training? Who makes it, and what tools do you use for making it?
That is actually a big learning curve for myself, since I don't typically come from the world of video, but being part of training and understanding that video delivery of training is probably the most effective way of training individuals. I actually got my hands dirty about 3-4 years ago, starting to look out for video companies out there that do a lot of live action or animation interspersed into those live action type videos. So we work with a company today that we obviously still need the physical boxes or the hardware, that we set it up in our lab, obviously bring in the video crew. They shoot these live action videos. It's a lot of obviously scripting, pointing to the equipment, lighting, and then most of the work obviously is in post-production. So once this content is all created, we go back and obviously edit it, and then make sure we add the appropriate annotations and callouts, and also have a Q&A at the end. And then we post it on our learning management system, which my team actually is managing and administrating. So we sign up all our customers to that, and they have the ability to watch these videos. So these videos have a long cycle to produce and create, and also a cost to it. But once they're final, and as we develop and build new products, we create a new video for that product as well.
Got it. And what kind of feedback have you received from customers about your remote training, video training, and so on?
Oh, it's actually been phenomenal. It took me by surprise. It was a lot of work. Obviously, it was a collaborative team effort. Myself leading the effort with a couple of my team members, but it was very telling in what people could quickly gain in a matter of 3 or 4 minutes, without having to peruse a 60-70 page document or a spec sheet or a product manual. So it gave everybody what they exactly needed, and it gave it was simple enough that non-technical people could understand it, but also enough knowledge that if you were technical, it was actually useful for them to know some of the intricacies of the equipment as well. So it was a sort of primer. It was meant to hit all audiences. So because of that, it wasn't segmented at any specific type of audience. So I think it actually worked out really well. And the validation of the first few videos obviously continues to fuel the creation of future videos along the same format for me.
Got it. Do you use YouTube for kind of any of your customer training videos or any demos and so on?
YouTube's primarily used more from a company standpoint, from a marketing standpoint. We have a lot of vendor interviews. We have a lot of case studies that we put out. We have a lot of product launches, perhaps at a trade show. So normally, our social media team and our marketing team is more involved with YouTube because the content that I create is a little bit more specific. It's not completely proprietary, but it could be. So it's not typically public. It's in our learner management system, which we actually sign up people to. And the other reason we also do that is so that we can also track who are the individuals who are actually reviewing and taking these videos, what companies they work with, what is their background. So we collect a lot of, it's more of a, what do you call a authenticated access, if you will. So that way it's not just a free-for-all.
Got it. I want to switch gears a little bit and focus more inward on how you run your team.
Sure.
That works remote. So could you go into a little bit of how you have meetings with your team, right? So I'm sure there's a lot of coordination involved in what you do. If you can just take us through a kind of a week of your work and what happens in a typical week. What kind of meetings do you have? And how do you select a time for the meeting, given that people are in different time zones?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I have personally believed in for a long time, not the least when I truly started managing teams, was anything to be accomplished should be done effectively in short time or less. We can't spend a lot of time because obviously time is very valuable. So anything that takes 60 minutes or longer is very, very ineffective. So all my meetings are 30 minutes or less. And the idea being is if we can accomplish everything that we need to in 30 minutes, would make us much more efficient as to what we're trying to do. So as far as both my teams go, every single meeting that I've ever hosted or ran is 30 minutes or less, internal, obviously. Customer meetings are obviously driven by the customer more so on what their needs are. So we have a weekly stand-in meeting. Typically, that's how I like to keep it, just to be able to quick check in, to be able to understand what's going on, what the roadblocks are, what are the future steps to be able to take. So it's pretty much a standing meeting at a time pre-selected that works across all time zones based on everybody's schedule. And 95% of the time we stick to it. Obviously, there's sometimes things change. Most of our meetings are also at this point voice-driven, call-driven, because obviously being in a remote area and being in a industry where we're all constantly traveling and collaborating, I can't necessarily always expect my team to be physically located at any given point. So whether they're in an airport or whether they're in the car or mobile, whatever it is, they should be able to quickly jump on the call. So it's a 30-minute call, mostly voice-driven. Occasionally, we do have some online collaboration that we want to talk about a specific thing. But most of the people are reporting to some of the deliverables that we're working on and sharing this content, because a lot of our work does require some time to research or build. So that's generally how a lot of our day-to-day goes by as far as the meetings goes. And then I report on any things that I'm working on or tools that I've possibly built out for the team. And given the technical nature of it, a lot of it does require some time to actually validate it and peruse it.
Outside of meetings, how do you coordinate with the rest of your team? Again, what tools do you use there? And I'd like to hear about some of the challenges you've run into in communicating and working with a remote team.
Yeah, I think ultimately the backbone of everything we do is making sure you're connected, right? I mean, I think we all understand that. We even more so because we live in the business of connecting people. And the irony is sometimes we can't make these things work. I mean, we have a meeting set up, but technology is always a surprise. There's no proper connectivity. The link doesn't work. The app doesn't work. So it's one of those things that, and of course, as you probably are well aware, it always seems to not work when the meeting is more important than others. And so we've had those issues and concerns, and we've sort of still got enough. We'll get a laugh out of it and move on. But a lot of our collaboration today, from a corporate standpoint, is Skype. So we use Skype for Business. It works, I would say, mostly. We have obviously some challenges with it, but a lot of the collaborations is at this point Skype is just kind of what we, I think, get used to. Obviously, with external folks, I can't dictate that, right? So we do screen shares a lot via Skype. We do, remote control of the other person's monitor if need be. Obviously, be able to quickly show stuff or talk about stuff, point out stuff. And some of the other challenges are, I'm constantly sharing my screen and updating it, but the person on the other end can't see those updates. They've either lost the ability to do it. Connections are good, but it's just, perhaps the software acting up. Some of it, we don't chase and solve the problems. It's just, let's move on, find a different way to do it, is kind of how we go about. But we do use remote desktop a lot, even for design purposes. We have remote desktop machines that other people can sort of remote into.
Got it. So how do you kind of maintain, possess the tribal knowledge in your team, right? So there's folks who figure out kind of certain ways to solve problems that they have encountered, and it probably gets communicated in real time, but also how do they kind of put it down in writing, or maybe make a screen recording to show kind of what they do, so that the rest of the team can benefit from what they have learned. So do you have any kind of ways in which you manage this knowledge base that your teams is creating all the time?
I think just like anybody else, we certainly have app notes, white papers, how-to documents. But Sunil, I think one of the things I'll tell you, again, I'm probably stating the obvious here, but experience is probably the best teacher. I could put out as many documents or as many help guides as you will. Until that individual is faced with the challenge or problem of doing it, they're probably not going to be learning it as fast. And I think there's a good story as well. In fact, I don't mean to digress here, but in one of our in-person training classes, which we typically hold at our headquarters, when the room was first built out or put together, we actually built a little mini refrigerator for the room. And unfortunately, the way the refrigerator is set up is anybody who doesn't watch their knuckles when they try to open the refrigerator, they basically get it jammed between the cabinet right next to it and the handle of the refrigerator. First class, I told everybody before I started class, hey, watch for this, pay attention to it. Probably a couple of people took note of it. By second day, everybody knew what to do because everybody had jammed their knuckle at least once. Right. And after that, I realized, you know what, I probably don't even need to tell anybody. So with every class now, within about an hour, everybody figures to watch for the refrigerator handle. Right. So I like to always take that as an example, is to say, look, I mean, I can tell people the rules, I can build all this content, and I do a lot. I actually love that, intrinsically motivated to be able to go research out there, look at white papers, write up nice white papers. But over time, because everybody's running so fast, they got a lot of bandwidth challenges. I'm not actually seeing max utilization of a lot of these resources out there. A few people will, but a lot of them don't until a question is asked by a customer or they are faced with a challenge. So we have all these help guides, and obviously we have our intranet network that's got a lot of resource, but knowledge sharing has become difficult or inefficient sometimes as you have more and more people putting documents in, collaborating it, updating it. I wish I could say there's a perfect, efficient way, but unfortunately there's not. So I try to stay on top of it myself, try to constantly remind my own teams about what to pay attention to, what to run into. And it's almost, as you said, tribal knowledge, but I think we're just doing it the guerrilla style sometimes to be most effective. So it I think comes with the experience, I suppose, knowing where to look for what to look, and sharing that, sometimes floating it back up once a month or once a week, depending on what the need of the hour is. And I think it simply comes down to, because everybody is now doing more and more in less and less time. So the incentive to go look for something or to learn is probably much difficult than sometimes just being able to call and say, hey, can you send me this or show me this? And that's kind of how we would go with it.
Now, part of the operation of any team is like having a tight feedback loop, right? Like you have folks who are working on things, and they might introduce bugs, they might make mistakes, and usually it's some other team member that points out those bugs or mistakes to them. It could even be something that a customer finds
Absolutely.
in the field, and then you need to communicate it back to your team so they can like start working on it and troubleshoot it. uh, could you kind of throw some light on how your team does issue reporting or bug reporting internally? Like how do you uh, what are the processes you have for communicating issues that people find to the rest of the team?
Yeah, and nothing moves faster than a customer calling you, right? As I think is very evident. So as soon as it comes from the customer, every team's on alert to be able to actually get the message passed and going. And it does happen. Obviously, the severity of the incident or the severity of the issue is constantly monitored. We obviously have a support team. So typically customer-facing issues or challenges typically come directly to my support team. My team gets looped in depending on the need, but normally we're not facing the customer day to day other than maybe the training classes. But my own team certainly collects a lot of the feedback from the training classes and funnels it off to the product team or engineering team or R&D team, because obviously people have actually worked with this. With the design side, of course, we have a lot of bugs that are online. Sometimes the customer points out, sometimes we find out, and because of the standard that I have tried to continue to enforce and build on the team, I try to ensure that we are actually solving or fixing these bugs, or at least communicating a plan to fix these bugs as early as able. Because I think getting something fixed is great, but at least knowing when that's going to get fixed is definitely much more as useful, right? So I think it's one of those things that. It's up to each of our individual teams that are part of our company, and how seriously that's going to affect their need or their customers' interaction. So I think we have a system in place. I almost want to say it's not necessarily a written system, but there's certain key subject matter experts in different departments at our own company who typically get roped in, and they are able to effectively get the message out to the right folks to make sure that there's enough urgency and importance on the issue itself. And obviously, we are a pretty small company still. Solid is a pretty small company, so we are mostly a flat organization for the most part. So we have a few of us who connect frequently, once or twice a week, sometimes to again chat through high-level items or challenges that we're going with, and everybody's mostly aware of everything that's going on and who's got lead on it.
Now, your team's like fully distributed. I'm curious how, kind of moving on to the more, how do you keep everyone upbeat and kind of energetic in the workplace? Just curious what you do for remote team building. How do you get everyone up and pumped and ready for the workday or for the week?
Right.
Tell us something about that.
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge. I think it's especially when you're not collaborating with folks day to day, I think can be very unsettling for a lot of people. You get kind of go down your own hole, and you're really stuck in sometimes not being able to see the bigger picture. It is certainly a challenge. I think the industry has morphed into a point where people understand that's the sort of baseline in what we do. So in fact, most of our industry is pretty remote because we are very product driven, sales driven. So being in front of the customers, being in front of those kind of individuals. But my team specifically, we do a lot of traveling, but a lot of our travel is tied to very, very high intense sort of work in front of customers. And there's not a whole lot of time or bandwidth for socialization. So, but when we do, we take it, right? When we get a chance, we certainly to engage. But not everybody on my team is in that position to do it. So it is certainly a challenge. I don't think I have a right answer for it. We try to meet up at least once a year physically. So at least we can get out, and I try to do some activities for my team that takes the mind away from our day-to-day. But staying high octane, staying motivated, and staying productive is certainly, I think, comes with talking about it all the time, and making sure that when we win projects, we obviously that's communicated to, and there's a sense of accomplishment. Obviously, providing any sort of incentives, whether they might be monetary or whether they might be other types, also certainly help. So I think just that, as with any remote team or any remote company, we probably deal with the same advantages and disadvantages. So there's that, and I think we just find the people who are willing to do it, and we obviously bring in those. We set up the expectations up front, so it's not a surprise coming for the future folks, right? And obviously, folks who have already done this in the past, for them, it's they know how to do it. And in our industries, so we're still a close-knit industry. So most people have already done this one way or the other, and those are the ones who are typically moving around the same different companies.
So to wrap up, I've got a final question, and this is kind of hitting on the personal front.
Sure.
So can you tell us about kind of what are some of the challenges you faced working remote, as well as kind of what are the benefits of working remote that you personally really enjoy? Can get a little bit into that.
Yeah. We'll save the best for the last, right? The benefits. So let's talk about what doesn't work, or what the issues and challenges are. Being around your teammates and colleagues and folks certainly is can sometimes be something that you really miss. It gets monotonous, right? Staring at the same screen and the wall all day long. So this is my home office where I'm in right now. And collaboration is really you have to motivate yourself to pick up the phone and call somebody, right? Because we could tap away at emails all day long, which is what we do. But to be able to say a hi, to be able to walk around the cube across the office floor, or water cooler talk, I miss that certainly. I don't get a lot of the water cooler chats anymore. So that's certainly something that breaks up the day a little bit. You get a chance to have a routine going where you're in the office, you got all this stuff to do, and then you come back. So those are all, I think, but I think over time they become part of the process, and I don't really think about it much anymore. But I can certainly tell you the benefits of it. I see it, and it's probably why I'm doing it for so long. It's probably a lot more than the disadvantages. The benefits is, although I don't think it's a good thing with my family, but I feel like I get a lot more work done, which means I basically also work longer hours because there's nobody around, which is good, but it's also bad because that can be sometimes distracting, right? People stopping by or people talking to you. So I get a lot more done. I'm a lot less interrupted, and train of thoughts. I mean, sometimes to do a task, and so you probably understand this well as well. To do a task, it might take you 5 minutes, but to get the train of thought to do it, it might take you 20, right? And that's probably the biggest advantage you have working from home. You're on your own schedule. The commute's literally from my bed to my table, which is about 3 steps. So there's no traffic. There's no any of that wasting time and getting, really getting amped up. So I think that helps. And literally being on your own schedule. I mean, I have the freedom to, do personal errands or appointments as needed, but I'm able to still take care of the work as required to be able to deliver. And I would certainly encourage a lot more people to be able to be in this world of remote working, because I think it's a great way to police yourself with all the freedom that we have. The traditional back of the day type work where your boss was around, you worked, and it's almost like when the boss left, everybody felt a sense of relief. But these days, your boss is yourself, really. I mean, I may run a team, but ultimately, each one of people on my team actually are accountable to themselves before they're accountable to me, right? I mean, they have a sense of responsibility, they have a sense of accomplishment that they want to achieve and grow in the career. So I think I certainly encourage a lot of, especially the young folks who are getting into the industry, to check out remote work, because a lot of people think it's not for everybody, but I think it could be for everybody. It saves a lot of the time. A lot of times I've gone into the office trying to solve a problem, but the person I needed to talk to is either stuck in traffic or is just in the office, but not in the right mood because of traffic. So you have all these challenges, sometimes ultimately, you spend a half hour talking about it, right? But I need the work to be done. So I think those might know a small example, but I think it plays into the whole role of everybody working in the office, which is still needed. I think some teams still require that element. But we have found a way to synergize and sync up pretty well remotely um, and measure those progress, but that's important, right? We have a lot of metrics where we measure quarterly and annually what worked, what didn't work, and I'm a firm believer in I don't need you to be at your desk 8 to 5 every.
I think we're just seeing an example of a remote work hiccup, which is the network gives up.
Should be the status.
Okay, we just lost you for a little bit, but I hope it got recorded in the live stream.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, now I can hear you fine. But I think it is a good example. It is like almost on cue when you're talking about remote work.
There you go, right? So some people work really well at night. Some people work really well in the daytime. Some people work really well in the afternoon. So why put a wall around hours, right? If I need the work done, I don't care whether you do it 8 to 5 or midnight to 7 a.m. Whatever it is I think the biggest advantage. I think, and especially today's world is much more connected than ever. So why not?
Awesome. All right, Lack. Thank you so much for sharing with us like how you work and how you run your team. And I learned a lot from kind of your experience and your stories.
Yeah, pleasure's all mine. Thank you for your time as well.
All right, thanks. This concludes the interview. All right, hope you enjoyed it.
You too. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Bye.